Hello, welcome my presentation about Robot Framework after Jython. I'm going to tell you some ways to move from Jython to pure Python and also the ways to utilize the existing Java libraries when running tests with the Python version of Robot Framework. And the ways I'm going to present are basically just plug in for the current runs. So you don't basically have to change much. But first, some things about me. So I'm Juho Saarinen and working currently as test and DevOps architect at Maverick Software. And I have been consultant since 2007 and in the field of testing since 2005. And in addition to work, I also contribute to open source projects, for example, Robot Framework, and in there, especially Java related things and libraries. And I'm also quite enthusiastic towards DevOps, testing, and cloud, as maybe you notice at the bottom. But that's about me. Then we can go to the real deals. Let's start first from where we are now. So currently, the Robot Framework inside the Java application development lifecycle is running with Jython, or usually running with Jython, which is pure Java implementation of Python 2, which had end of life in January 2020. And it has been quite slow project. Latest patch release took 3 years, and Jython 3 has been mentioned 2008, but not working yet. Why it's then so good for the Robot Framework side is that it's pure Java, and there's possibility to compile Python code and distribute through Maven Central or other artifactories like Robot Framework does. And these things allow that we can just include whole Robot Framework through Maven or Grails, so there's no need to install anything separately. And well, it also has the weaknesses. The release times has been quite slow. It's slower than pure Python, and it's not able to use C libraries using modules like LXML. But as said, this is where we are now. So how it then looks at the development side. First, basically, this is everything we need. There is library definitions because we are using, in the example, same test cases for each approach. So in the library, we just include some basic Robot Framework libraries. We include one Python library, and then we include our own library. And actually, the test cases use two different libraries, but we are importing only this wrapper because this is the one that is required by other approaches. So it's easier to use at Jython side also this one. And what this Java wrapper basically is, it is just a single class which includes DP library and HTTP request library and uses the Robot Framework course annotation library. So it's easy to call the methods because those are same every time. And this annotation library basically offers this library in dynamic way. And at the POM side, we have the libraries actually needing, so HTTP request library and DB library, and also H2 database, so we can make some real tests against the database. Then we are using the not standard source directory, which contains the just shown wrapper library. And then we use this Robot Framework Maven plugin to run the test cases, where we just define some variables that are needed for the tests, a resource directory where the libraries.robot is, and then extra path directories that contain some libraries we are using, which are written in pure Python. Then we use Maven Antron plugin to get the class paths to tests, and then we just make the runs. And this is quite simple. Of course, it's quite long, but that's big XML. But this is where we have started. I'm going to show the runs of all of these a bit later stage. So now let's go to the first replacement option. So there's basically two parts that need to be changed when Jython is going to be sunset. First, core. Robot Framework is supporting Jython and same time Python 2, at least with version 4. But I think you should start running the core Robot Framework with Python 3 as soon as possible, because then that's part that's not breaking at least. And there is help for that with Maven plugin 1.8.0 to define the external runner configuration that the test starts with Python runner. It doesn't handle the installation of Python nor Robot Framework, but those are something that are quite easy to add, for example, to Docker images that are used to run the tests. And when this configuration is changed, your libraries are not working anymore, because then Python doesn't have any idea of the JVM that is running there. So that's something we can look for next. With the libraries, there's basically 3 different ways to do the change. One is to use Python Java bridges, or then Robot Framework's internal remote library, or then look for the Jython successors. But we can start with the checking first the bridges. So JPype and Py4J, which are quite alike, handle the JVM starting themselves, and Py4J uses a bit similar approach and remote library. So the Java code has to be started in the gateway server, and then the Python client just connects to that server. And none of these options offer direct listener support. So if your Java library uses listener, that has to be separately implemented to the wrapping Robot Framework library written in Python. And these are easiest to combine with Docker, because these require some sources and compilers to be able to work. But at the code side, these are quite simple. So first, if we compile the actual Jython runner with the JPype, you see that, yeah, of course, name has changed. Then we require Maven exec plugin so we can generate the library documentation. And then we have to add the project base directory, which contains this Python wrapper as an extra Python path. And we run things with Python. So the Robot Framework is running, in this case, with Python 3. And then, as mentioned, the document generation is a bit different. So it's different between these two. And then if we quickly check the Py4J and JPype, they are actually exactly like each other at the POM side, POM file side. But then how this wrapping between Java and Python works with these Py4J and JPype? They both implement this Python written Robot Framework library and import themselves. The initialization takes library name and the whole class path that is needed for JVM. And then the methods they use from Java side are just wrapped to the Python functions. So get keyword names, run keyword, and get keyword documentation. And as you see, there is need to have some type conversion manually, and some is happened automatically by the implementation. Like you see, the response from get keyword documentation is Java lang string, so it has to be converted to string. with this with JPype, but with the PyGenius, it just handles it internally. And same thing with the get keyword names with JPype, it has to be explicitly converted to string and put to the list. And with the PyGenius, it just knows how to do it automatically. And I said it's easiest to use these with Docker because these require compilers and also the source packages for Python. Then Py4J is a bit different thing. It doesn't require compilers to work, but it requires some other things. So when it's installed, it installs the Python package plus a jar package to the local drive. And that jar package has to be added to the Maven repository because that's not available at any public repositories. And then we can import it to the Maven. Or if we compare with the Jython version, name is different. And then we have this Py4J Java dependency here. And we are not building the kind of common wrapper library because we need this gateway server, which was mentioned. And as you see here, we are getting the gateway server port. So there's also know where to connect. And the Py4J library itself, again, quite similar. But this time we only need the port because the port is one that connects to the library. And we again need to do some conversion between types here to be able to work both sides. And then we need this Java gateway server, which basically just extends the annotation library. We include these keywords from the libraries we are using, and then we start the gateway server to the port, which is given from Maven side. So second option would be to use remote library. And there was presentation about that at RoboCon 2020 and also a workshop this year. So if you're interested about how that really works, please check those. And just mentioning this Maven's build helper Maven plugin that can help to get the ports needed for the remote work when running locally. But as said, the remote library has been spoken a bit, so nothing more about that. Then these Jython successors, which doesn't really exist, which is quite sad thing. The GraalPython is most promising one, but it's still experimental and it can't be distributed through Maven Central like Jython can. And that's basically because the installation is always specific like Python. There is no way to run it with pure JVM. And then still Jython 3, as said, it has been spoken over a decade already, but still hoping that maybe it comes out someday. And it also hoping that it would work same way as current Jython, so pure JVM thing. Then just technicalities related to the sizes of the images. So GraalPython is kind of own league, almost 2 GB image. Then the base image, which is used to run Jython things, is about 500 megabytes plus 120 megabytes of these Maven downloaded dependencies. And then the rest are quite the same league because they all require some OS level dependency to be installed, like compile tools. Okay, 10 demos. So let's start first with this Jython approach. So this is something that's currently probably in use quite many places. And one thing I have to say, I have run this beforehand, so it doesn't download everything with Maven again. It just has everything already there, so we just execute the tests. And then we wait a bit. It starts the test with Jython, runs some DB tests, then some custom Python library tests, and then some HTTP tests. And then writes the logs to the directory. And you see, it took around 30 seconds. And then we can make same thing with JPype. So this uses the wrapper library, and the test itself are run with Python 3. And it's quite same, but one thing you might notice immediately is that they are a bit faster to run. So now when it goes, it took 13 seconds, and here it took 30 seconds. And we can of course continue same with the PyGenius or Py4J. As you remember, the Py4J version was a bit different. It starts this gateway server, then runs the test, and then the Maven plugin also shuts down this gateway server, so it's not hanging there. And again, a bit under 20 seconds and about 13 seconds, so quite fast executed this Python version. And then the last, the remote, because here we see that even though remote sounds like quite nice, there are some issues with the complex object that a library can return. Those work fine when having those bridges or pure Jython part, but when using remote library, it doesn't handle the attributes because the remote library gets string even though the response is dictionary. So maybe some changes needed to the library or the JRobot remote server, but just wanted to show that it's not necessarily just plug and play kind of thing. And finally, about the GraalPython, which is the one promising approach. And here I have Docker file created that have installed already the robot here. So I can start robot, and I of course hope that I get the information stating robot is installed and how to use it. But that's not the case. I get this host symbol IO buffer reader exception, which is kind of unclear for me why. Maybe because it's just experimental. So it's not going further than that. But as seen, it's quite easy to run tests, and the test cases itself has not changed. Only thing changed is the resource file that imports the libraries, because the library imports are a bit different with each approach. I would say that the easiest solution, of course, is staying with Jython, so don't do anything. Robot Framework 4 will still support that. But for the local running, and if wanting to be sure that you can run Robot Framework after version 4, I would say JPype and PyGenius are best bets to go. And if you want to distribute the libraries, the remote library is the key, and it's also already kind of established its state. But none of the solution offer, for example, direct possibility to use Java libraries as a listener. So there's always something between. And I would say that my personal hopes are still in GraalPython and Jython 3.
Joe, welcome to RoboCon.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you. So I'm just curious to know, I'm kind of new to Robot Framework from this perspective. Do you know how popular or what percentage of users actually are still using Jython?
It's quite hard to say. I at one point tried to compare a bit about Maven Central or Sonatype download metrics with the PyPy download metrics, but it's kind of hard to say. I think that the main Java usage comes from the a bit older world, so kind of combining Robot Framework with the full application lifecycle, like running tests with Maven and same way as the build is made and packages is made. So I think that is the main thing for the Java side.
I guess I was Googling this as well, and a lot of people saying it may be supported in Python 3, but it's not 100%. So should people just forget about Jython and just move on, or should they hold on and hope that it's going to be supported?
Well, for the core part, I think that it's good to move to the Python running. And the main thing is that how to handle the libraries. Are there already available Python libraries available, or if something is to be done, or is there custom-made Java libraries that has to be handled some way?
And I guess along these lines, Pekka asked, which alternatives would you use if you were to completely move over?
I would say that for the core, change running with Python, and for the libraries, well, it depends a bit on the environment. If I want to distribute things, I would probably go with the remote library, and then if wanting this kind of locally or single machine running thing, then the JPype or PyGenius would be quite nice. But all of these kind of expect, in a way, compared to Java, that there is Docker in use, because that just simplifies things quite a lot.
Absolutely. So Ed has a question. Ed wants to know, can you talk about the importance of and the value in connecting the Java world and the Python world?
I think the main thing, it actually goes a bit broader than just Python and Java. If kind of we acknowledge that the core has to move to run to Python and that's it, then it's more about what kind of expertise is needed to extend the robot framework and its capabilities. And I think that is the kind of key thing here, that you don't have to know how to write Python. You can write libraries, for example, with Golang or JavaScript or Java, and they work fine. It's just kind of matter understanding what are the limitations that you get with these other languages, let's say. Like the one thing mentioned here was the listeners. So listeners are not really working with Jython with Java libraries, but otherwise basically kind of Python library thing, if the wrapper is not calling those explicitly.
Great. So Jagan wants to know, do you know if there are any specific libraries that are only available in Jython and not in Python?
I think that, for example, the examples that are available at GitHub, I used this database library as an example, because at least in my expertise, these Python database drivers, they exist, but they are in a way quite annoying to use. For example, Oracle, Oracle is the main kind of pain that I have struggled with compared to single jar, and that's it. But otherwise, I think that most of the libraries have at least some level. These public libraries have at some level Python version available, but then the in-house libraries are kind of other thing that use, for example, those Java drivers that are easily available for the, let's say, IBM MQ, for example.
So Pekka also asked, have you actually tested GraalPython? What are your thoughts on it?
Actually, I just have struggled the installation part, because I said it's so experimental that it only allows to install whitelisted packages directly, and then with pip packages are installable only if they are available at HTTP, so not HTTPS support there. And usually when I've tried to get anything reasonable done, I have encountered the error seen at the presentation or something similar. So it's kind of, even the version number is, I think, 21 currently. It doesn't really feel like that.
Very cool. Next question is from Trisna. Trisna wants to know, what Selenium library that can be used in Robot Framework with Jython for doing the web tests? The Java Selenium one or the Selenium library Robot Framework?
Well, if using Jython world, there is this Robot Framework Selenium library Java available, which can be used. But I said, if moving to running the Robot Framework with Python or the core with Python, then I would recommend also to start using either this Selenium library, which is written in Python, or then check for example, the browser library.
So we have another question from Ed in Slido. Ed wants to know, as a follow-up, one of the advantages is that we can connect Robot Framework to any Java-based testing system.
I think that it's the main thing, kind of main Java things are related to whole life cycle. The testing systems itself, I don't see that a big thing, just as long as the drivers, for example, if drivers are needed, are available at different languages. So it might be that I kind of somehow misunderstood the question, but
no problem. I guess we have a question here, a different question. He can resubmit Ed if I didn't understand correctly. The next question is from Manny. He said, can you just run the JRobo remote server locally and use Java libraries this way locally?
Yes, that's completely possible. The thing is, why I mentioned at the presentation that it's not it's when you want to distribute things, is that you have this kind of extra layer, extra network traffic ongoing there. And with JPype or PyGenius, you just don't have that. And that's why the Py4J wasn't even mentioned at the summary page, because this, I think that having the server there is not reasonable, and Py4J is in a way new thing compared to remote server. But yeah, it's completely possible to run the remote things locally, and the Maven build helper plugin also helps there to get the pods that are not in use.
It's a really helpful session. Those are all the questions we have, and we're just on time. So any parting words of wisdom, though, you want to leave RoboCon that you think people may want to know about that they didn't ask about Jython and this change?
Well, the main thing is that just write things, not to expect everything to be ready. These all things that I were checking this time were kind of new to me. Or GraalPython I checked earlier, but other things were completely new. So this is also one way to learn things. So
absolutely,
just check things and propose the talk.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for contributing to RoboCon. And folks can definitely check you out during the breaks in the conference room, hopefully, in the RoboCon venue for more questions.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Cheers.